absence of fundamental fairness, we experience a cascade of deteriorating conditions. The erosion of trust, the weakening of social cohesion, alienation, marginalization, the legitimacy of authority diminishes, cynicism and disengagement grow, and ultimately, people abandon civic participation altogether. Fundamental fairness, Mr. Hochman, that's all we ask. With a KBLA Talk 1580 editorial, I'm Tavis Smiley. As always, we welcome your feedback.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Welcome to the beginning of the week. And I mean, he keeps throwing it at us at the beginning of the week. On our show today, a serious person to address very serious times. Today on the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, attorney Wade Henderson. I want to get his take on President Donald Trump's executive order effectively gutting the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Department of Justice ending its desegregation order in a parish in Louisiana, effectively allowing racial segregation to be legal, and the administration's gutting of the Civil Rights Division and the Voting Rights Division at the Department of Justice. Many of the career lawyers at DOJ have resigned as a result of this. Wade Henderson is the principal of Wade J. Henderson, LLC. Henderson serves as advisor to major corporations and nonprofits on matters relating to civil and human rights. He currently serves as the interim president of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights and the Leadership Conference Education Fund, organizations he previously led for more than 20 years. The Leadership Conference is the nation's premier civil and human rights coalition, charged by its diverse membership of more than 200 national organizations to promote and protect the civil and human rights of all persons in the United States. The Education Fund is its research, communications, and public education arm. After taking the helm of the Leadership Conference in 1996, he worked diligently to address emerging policy issues of concern to the civil and human rights community and to strengthen the effectiveness of the coalition. Wade, I'm going to get through the rest of your resume over the course of our show. Wade, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thank you, Jesse, and it's great to be with you this afternoon. Let me begin by just correcting one point that you mentioned. I am not the interim executive director or president of the Leadership Conference. The current president is Maya Wiley, the distinguished civil rights lawyer, activist from New York. She ran for mayor in the last election, and she has been a noteworthy stalwart on civil and human rights for many years. Maya is doing an extraordinary job.
An extraordinary job. I was with her at the National Action Network conference in New York. I knew that. I don't know why I pulled out since the last time you were on our show the exact same bio.
No worries.
But my sincere hope is to have Maya on our show very soon. She was at the National Action Network conference, and she was extraordinary. Wade, but thank you for being here today.
I'm honored, Jesse. Thank you for having me.
I can only imagine, given the breadth of your work, your life's work, that the last 3, 4, 5 days has been fairly extraordinary. We've talked about some of it on the show. But this weekend alone, beyond 140, I think we're now at 147 executive orders from Donald John Trump. This weekend, he issued an order that essentially many columnists are writing guts the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Share with us what that means.
Yeah. Well, first, Jesse, let me say again, it's an honor to be with you. And this is an extraordinary time for the country and for the African American community in particular. The efforts that President Trump undertook this weekend to end programs that President Johnson had initiated to achieve equal opportunity in American life, of course, built on a series of executive orders that he issued in the first week after his inauguration that sought to end so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, which were generated to promote equal opportunity in American life. Now, as you began this conversation, this is an extraordinarily difficult time for the country as a whole, but most especially for the African American community. President Trump's actions are literally a scorched earth approach, an attack on civil and human rights that's really designed to take the country back to the period just after the end of Reconstruction in American life. Reconstruction being the civil rights programs that were put into place immediately after the Civil War and after the passage of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution, which guaranteed full citizenship rights for African Americans coming out of enslavement.
Let me take this one moment because we have to come forward. I promise you the next segment is our longest and it is all yours. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. When we come forward, our great guest is Wade Henderson.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580. If you missed our KBLA Talk 1580 Town Hall, the Altadena Eden Fire, 100 Days and Counting, you missed an evening of reverence, reflection, and reality.
You gotta live in the reality because this is it. Every day you wake up, is this my life? Don't stay in denial because yes it is. Don't stay in bargaining where you're praying for a miracle and if it wouldn't have happened, then this is what I would have done. It did.
Our panel participants kept it real. Really real.
I think, number one, it's amazing to me how we ignore systemic racism in our community. And as a people, we've apologized for so much. But when will we stop apologizing for what we have paid for? Because the truth of the matter is we paid for this.
You can always count on KBLA Talk 1580 to give it to you straight, no chaser. When you love folk, you tell them the truth. Seeking the truth, speaking the truth. We're KBLA Talk 1580, and we don't black down.
We're with Bridget, whose husband won't be home for months, and whose daughter is due any day. We're with Mike, who's leaving home to protect his family and yours. We're with all service members and their families who need community, connection, and maybe a bit of magic. Are you with them? Learn more at uso.org today.
Ready to order?
Yes. We're earning unlimited 3% cash back on dining and entertainment with the Capital One Saver card. So let's just get one of everything.
Everything?
Fire everything. The Capital One Saver card is at table 27 and they're earning unlimited 3% cash back.
Yes, Chef! This is so nice.
Had a feeling you'd want 3% cash back on dessert.
Ooh, tiramisu.
Earn unlimited 3% cash back on dining and entertainment with the Capital One Saver card. Capital One, what's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com for details.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. Let me first apologize to my guest that before the break I had to cut him off, and I also got part of his bio wrong. Wade, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
Wade, just before the break, you were speaking about the president's actions and their relationship to the end of the Civil War and the beginning of Reconstruction.
Yeah, without taking our audience back too far, this really is a scorched earth attack on civil and human rights at every level. It is taking us back, literally, to the period of the country just after the end of the Civil War, when Reconstruction efforts were undertaken by Congress to promote equal opportunity on behalf of the formerly enslaved. But it ended in the 1877 with an act which I won't go into here. It ended, and it ushered in the so-called period of Jim Crow, separate but equal facilities and opportunities in American life. Of course, we know they were never equal, even if they were separate. And it created hardships on behalf of African Americans that literally, in its own way, was slavery by another name. The level of discrimination which existed in our country between the Supreme Court's decision in Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896 and the Supreme Court's decision in Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, which ended formal government segregation at the federal level, was something that, our parents and grandparents endured without complaint, even as they struggled to overcome that discrimination. Trump's actions are taking us back to that period. It's a period that I call a pre-Brown period, a pre-Brown era of the country, where equal opportunity was simply a distant dream and discrimination in various kinds existed. And that's where we are now. In the president's first week in office after the inauguration, he issued a series of executive orders which sought to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the federal government and in private industry, encouraging the private corporations to dismantle their programs as well. These programs were really designed to implement the letter and spirit of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which sought to end formal racial segregation and establish equal opportunity, particularly in the era of employment. And the president's executive orders, in effect, ended federal government programs that promoted equal opportunity under the auspice of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It terminated grants and contracts, which the federal government had issued to states and to private enterprise. It, in essence, repealed previous executive orders that sought to provide equal opportunity. It really encouraged the federal government to end contractual relationships with private companies and nonprofits that had diversity, equity, and inclusion as one of their goals. It really sought to end these programs in every respect possible, and in so doing, ended equal opportunity initiatives that were just beginning to have a significant impact in changing our culture. So it really was a problem. This past weekend, he issued another executive order that sought to dismiss a program that was really the result of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which was passed to end employment discrimination. And it really focused on two levels. One was to ban intentional discrimination, which had existed where an individual says, look, I don't want to hire a Black person because you're Black. I'm hiring a white person in the job regardless of their qualifications, and that's the way it's going to be. The Civil Rights Act ended that. But it also addressed what, in essence, were neutral policies on their face that had a discriminatory effect or impact on groups like African Americans, Latinos, and others. And there was a case in the Supreme Court in 1971 called Griggs versus Duke Power and Light, which established a new way of examining discrimination. It no longer focused on intent and instead focused on the effect of seemingly neutral policies. And that's something to take into account. And the president ended that practice, or sought to end it, in an executive order issued this past weekend. So it completes, in essence, a series of executive orders that were designed, in effect, to end equal opportunity initiatives at the federal level, at the state level, and in the relationship to private enterprise. So it's really been a devastating period for the rights and protections that African Americans most especially enjoy.
Wade, consistent with your thinking, the historical narrative that you lay the context of the president's executive orders, this weekend, the Department of Justice also ended a desegregation order in a Louisiana parish, which obviously suggests, according to the root, that the president and his administrations, his underlings, and others have an interest in the resegregation of education in the United States. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that's certainly a reasonable interpretation of the president's actions. In effect, the president called on the Department of Justice to end its affirmative efforts to desegregate public schools. And of course, in the aftermath of Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, many states that had segregated public schools sought to perpetuate those schools in spite of the Supreme Court's decision. So in places like Prince Edward County, Virginia, that school system shut down for a period of 5 years rather than to desegregate its public schools because the Supreme Court said you don't have to provide a public education, but if you do, it must be done on an equal basis. And in this instance, the county of Prince Edward, Virginia, decided against that and ended it. Segregation in public education has been a hallmark of American education systems since our founding. Certainly, there were some jurisdictions that maintained schools on a racially equal basis, but very few. And what Brown sought to end was that practice and extended to everyday life as well. The president's actions this weekend in instructing, or rather the Department of Justice's action this weekend to end its involvement in a school desegregation case, in effect guarantees that there will be slippage at the state level in which states decide for themselves how best to promote equal educational opportunity, and racial equality is not one of the considerations that many states will be required to take into account. And the end of that desegregation order is really just the tip of the iceberg. What we're likely to see are instances where states are no longer providing the level of funding to promote equal educational opportunity for all of its citizens.
Wade, it feels like my Mondays are like Groundhog Day. It feels like he goes home on the weekend and it's like, what can I do to disrupt Negroes this week?
Yeah, there's something to be said for that, Jesse. Something to be said for that.
Maybe a glass of wine and a cigar. He just sits back and say, hey, listen, this weekend also, the Trump's Justice Department, its appointees removed the leadership of the voting rights unit of the Department of Justice. So beyond the Civil Rights Act, he's kind of creeping over into the 1965 Voting Rights Act.
Oh, easily. Jesse, this is a sort of flood the zone strategy in which the president tries to do everything all at once to disrupt the status quo. With respect to civil rights, he came out swinging. So the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I refer to by that formal name rather than DEI, because the American people need to understand most people don't oppose diversity. Certainly they don't oppose inclusion as a general matter. But DEI has come to be the equivalent of racial discrimination against white people, even though nothing could be further from the truth. And so the president's actions are designed, among other things, to achieve a certain level of retribution, a certain level of dramatic change of the status quo, moving the needle back to a more difficult, racially segregated period in our country, but also to distract from some of the concerns that were the basis of his election in November. So food prices, gas prices, the economy as a whole continues to suffer from his inattention, his new tariff programs, which are increasing taxes on the American consumer and forcing us to do more with less, if you will, because of the economic burden that tariffs will impose. And all of that is distracted by some of these efforts around discrimination, which serve a twofold purpose. They achieve his result in removing programs that promote equal opportunity on the one hand, and they serve as a distraction from his criticism that he would face for his failure to live up to the expectations of his electorate.
Two other issues that occurred this weekend that emanate from the White House, from the thinking, the mindset of Donald Trump. In an interview, he said he was unsure as to whether or not the American people are entitled to due process and whether or not, as president of the United States, he has an obligation to uphold the Constitution.
It's really shocking, Jesse. It's really shocking. You know, due process rights are guaranteed by the Fifth Amendment to our Constitution. It is considered one of the bedrock provisions of law, promoting the rule of law as we have come to understand it, and achieving for this country a very unique place in the world, in that we have a constitution which guarantees certain inalienable rights to all of its citizens and all persons who live here under the Constitution, due process being one of the most fundamental. What we have seen the president do is, long before that declaration in his interview on Meet the Press, we have seen his actions which reinforce his dismissal of the rule of law and due process as a consideration. We see it most especially in his efforts around immigration policy, where he has chosen to deport a number of undocumented immigrants, yes, undocumented people who are here, but some under the rule of law, under existing programs for which they were entitled to apply, totally dismissing that and deporting them to a gulag, a prison in El Salvador, under the theory that they are gang members or criminals of a horrific degree that are entitled, that deserve to be sent to that prison, that horrific prison in El Salvador, and to have that done without due process of law. Now, he has tried to use a statute that was passed in 1798, the Alien Removal Act, Sedition Act, which was given power to use in time of war to address issues of national security. He sought to pervert that Alien Enemies Act in a way that has clearly distorted its intended purpose and has worked a serious hardship in denying individuals the due process rights to which the Constitution entitles them. The fact that he would be so bold as a president who has an oath to uphold the Constitution to say that he is not sure that these individuals deserve it or are entitled to it is really a shocking statement. But because so many things that he has said in recent weeks have been shocking, this did not register with the level that it really deserves. So I'm glad you brought it up.
The idea, though, that the president of the United States, in our final 2 minutes before the break, that somewhere in his mind is the idea, as the nation's chief law enforcement officer, that he doesn't have to uphold the Constitution, to you, Wade, must be equally as shocking.
Oh, it's shocking. It is and it isn't, Jesse. It is shocking on its face that he would make that declaration. Excuse me.
Bless you.
But knowing Trump as we do, it is not shocking. I mean, again, that oft-used Maya Angelou quote, when someone tells you who they are, believe them the first time.
The first time.
President Trump has told us who he is over the course of his public career and exposure. His treatment of the Central Park Five, the exonerated five, those five individuals who are accused of rape and assault in Central Park, and who he suggested deserved the death penalty, even though they were subsequently exonerated in a court of law, tells you his respect for the rule of law is almost non-existent. And what we are seeing in his actions with respect to immigrants, with respect to universities like Harvard and Columbia, with his attack on corporations that do business with the federal government, all that says to me is that he really is indifferent to the rule of law, and that he is promoting, in effect, an autocracy, which is obviously a corruption of the democratic process as we know it.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You're listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest is none other than Attorney Wade Henderson. When we come forward, I want Wade to deal with the extension and the expansion of presidential power and what we can do about it. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr.
It's afternoon drive time with Jesse Jackson Jr. Only on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Amber Payton with BIN News Now.
Don't let me go to jail tonight, yeah.
Rapper Jeezy may face jail time for violating his divorce deal with Jeannie Mai. A judge says he failed to hand over a 2021 Range Rover and warned that continued defiance could lead to jail. The divorce was finalized last summer. The Trump administration is cutting a $12 million grant to UC Davis, calling it too, quote, woke, end quote, and tied to a DEI and green agenda. The school was one of 7 to lose funding under the new policy. UC Davis says it may appeal or take legal action. And Black Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson has named Michael McMurray as the new aviation commissioner. He replaces Jamie Rhee, who stepped down in February. McMurray, who was Black, previously served under Mayor Daley and currently works at White & Company. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Joe Buck and John Smoltz welcoming you back to the City Center Convenience Mart. Uh-oh. She's looking at the cigarettes, but she just grabs the gum off the counter. Stand Up to Cancer and Rally want you to reduce your risk for cancer. Go to takeahealthystand.org.
Is this the title? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
Like LeBron, Clippers guard James Harden is facing a June 29 deadline to accept a player option for next season. Harden, who turns 36 in August, is scheduled to make $36 million next season with the Clippers. If Harden declines his player option, he can become a free agent. It will be interesting to see what kind of market will be out there for Harden after his disappointing performance Saturday in Game 7 at Denver. 7 points on 2 for 8 shooting. Harden still had a decent season with 22.8 points per game and 8.7 assists, which ranked 5th in the NBA. Less than 2 weeks after the NFL draft, Travis Hunter, Cam Ward, and Shedeur Sanders ranked 1, 2, and 3 in jersey sales among NFL draft picks. Ward was the number 1 overall pick by the Tennessee Titans. Hunter was taken at number 2 by the Jacksonville Jaguars. Sanders was not selected until the 5th round by Cleveland. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580. Talk radio. That's music to your ears. We're unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Zoe Williams, a.k.a. the voice of reason, encouraging you to join me weekdays from 7 to 9 p.m. for the world's most intriguing relationship radio roundtable. Every night, I facilitate and encourage our loyal listeners to participate in the most engaging relationship discussions you'll hear anywhere. So make it a point to rendezvous with me, Zoe Williams, the voice of reason, Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Trust me, your relationships will never be the same. The VOR is on fire tonight.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
During this time, it's important for everyone to know your rights. The 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments in the U.S. Constitution protects every one of us, regardless of immigration status. The 4th Amendment requires a judicial warrant to search your home. The 5th protects your right to remain silent, and the 6th gives you the right to an attorney. Just remember,
No warrant, no key. My privacy. You don't have to speak. No lawyer inside. Don't say a thing. Yeah, we all got rights.
Hey, we all got rights. You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My very special guest is none other than the great Wade Henderson. Wade is one of the most respected civil rights activists in our nation. I don't know a member of Congress who doesn't call upon Wade for advice, for his thinking, for direction, and even for very specific language that ought to be in legislation that they can champion in the form of amendments to make a difference in our society. So grateful for his decades of work on Capitol Hill and throughout our nation. Wade, welcome forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show.
Thank you, Jesse. It's great to be here.
Wade, in this segment, I want to talk about presidential power for a moment. I spent the better part of the COVID with Cornel West and Dr. James Forbes, a number of scholars from around the country. We're all locked into our homes. I made a discovery before the Bill of Rights in the Constitution that the Founding Fathers themselves called the finger of God. Now, it's a word construction that Thomas Jefferson is aware of. James Madison talks about it in Federalist number 37. 30 days after the Constitution, Alexander Hamilton writes in the New York Advertiser, "For my part, I sincerely esteem the Constitution, a system which without the finger of God never could have been devised upon by such a diversity of interests." And of course, the Bill of Rights after 1787 comes into the Constitution in 1791. The reason I'm raising this is I am convinced that the Constitution at its inception, one, was a theological system, that they gave great thought to the idea of how do they place a people's faith in a piece of paper, in a document. So they wrestled with this question of faith. The second thing that I'm convinced of is that in this word construction, which we've never really built out in our system, it has an interpretive possibility to just about resolve or address almost anything at any given hour in the nation's history. Assuming this, the presidency was intended to be an institution of unlimited moral authority, but an institution of limited constitutional authority. Now it seems we have a presidency of unlimited constitutional authority with almost no moral authority. Your thoughts on the expansive nature of the constitutional authority of the President of the United States or the presidency in ways that had never been considered by the founders?
Jesse, that is a very astute analysis. You know, the founders of our country set out a three-part system of government, a tripartite system of government on equal footing. With the presidency, the executive branch, with the national legislature, the Congress, and with the Supreme Court, each having unique powers unto itself, but powers that balanced out the equation so that each of those three branches of government provided input in the workings of our democracy and in our republic. This current period of Donald Trump's presidency has really distorted that. And in part, it is because of the way in which both the Supreme Court, but also the Congress, has abdicated some of its authority to the president, and also how the president has chosen to assert himself through executive orders, which have sought to make broad changes in the way our government works. And I think we have to step back for a minute. First of all, I think the historic context that you provide is significant. And I hope at some point you will devote one of your shows to a complete analysis of what history tells us about the workings of today's government, because I think our listeners could benefit from that. But I also think it is a reality that what we have now is a system that has been corrupted by an aggressive president who has sought to bring about change without going through the traditional mechanisms to achieve that. Now, the good news is that the American public senses that. And in spite of the election, including some of the president's supporters, they are backing away from some of the steps he has taken. For example, ABC, Washington Post, and Ipsos issued a poll of President Trump's first 100 days in office. And in effect, it was the lowest rating in 80 years. Unbelievable. 39% of respondents said that he was doing, they approved of the job he was doing. 55% indicated that they disapproved of that performance. And in that same poll, 65% suggested that the Trump administration is trying to avoid complying with federal court orders, and 64% said he's going too far in trying to expand presidential power. Those numbers would suggest that your analysis, Jesse, of what the current situation presents to the American people is shared by many. And this use of executive orders to bring about dramatic change in the way the government operates, in the way we do business, by dismissing federal employees wholesale without an evaluation of the important contributions that they are making, the establishment of tariffs as a way of doing business, which impose taxes on the American people, all of that represents an expansion of presidential power in a way that many American voters disagree with. And I think that point should be noted.
Well, wait, what about the complicity of the court? Abraham Lincoln gave a speech, I think it was at the Sanitary Fair, where he talked about the four carpenters. And Abraham Lincoln said, it is hard to imagine that four different groups of people could come together and frame the perfect framing of a house. I think this is the Sanitary speech after or before the Civil War. And he says, Roger Taney comes out with Dred Scott. Here's the Supreme Court making slavery legal everywhere. Here's the Congress of the United States with its various compromises before the Civil War. And then you have other decisions that were made. And Abraham Lincoln said these people came from different parts, different geography, different parts of the world, parts of the country. And yet when they come together, all of their pieces form the perfect framing of a house. He called them the four carpenters. The complicity of the Congress, the complicity of the courts, the complicity of the administration, and the, if you will, a cabinet meeting that was shameful. The idea that the president isn't even getting good advice from his advisors because they're all sitting there just nodding and praising him and making up facts that make him feel comfortable is deeply troubling for the idea of the very shared powers that the architects themselves had considered.
Yeah. Well, let me respond first by saying, look, it's important to underscore the fact that the Supreme Court in significant ways has changed the relationship of the president to the Constitution. But the lower federal courts are doing their jobs. Interestingly enough, it is the federal courts at the district level, district court level, and the Court of Appeals level that has pushed back against some of the president's actions. His effort to dismantle the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is a very important federal agency that protects consumers regardless of racial circumstance, has been thwarted by court action. His effort to deport immigrants without due process has been challenged by the federal courts. And the decision of the court, even the Supreme Court, to insist that the administration bring back the immigrant who was wrongly sentenced and rather deported to El Salvador, Garcia, was Alfredo Garcia. It was absolutely outrageous, and the courts have challenged that. So I think the federal courts deserve much credit for pushing back against this presidential overreach that we are discussing, because without them, we would be in dire circumstance indeed.
I just want to add that Letitia James and a number of state attorney generals have also turned the historic interpretation of the 10th Amendment to our favor on its head, where it's usually been used to support a separate and unequal America. They've been pushing with various legislation and various legal actions challenging at the state court level those decisions, arguing that they violate the 10th Amendment.
Yep. And I think they deserve much credit as well, Jesse, because without those state AGs, particularly the Democratic attorneys general, we would really not have the situation we have now. It would be far worse. So let's give credit to the lower federal courts, district courts, and courts of appeals, to the courageous judges that have stood up in the face of enormous pressure to issue decisions that go against the very independence and integrity of the court that we're talking about. And let's also credit some of the attorneys general, particularly Democratic attorneys generals, that have brought lawsuits challenging some of the president's actions and have succeeded. So the courts and those attorney generals have played a very important role in balancing the issue of overreaching of presidential power. But there was one Supreme Court decision in July of 2024 that stands out in the case of Trump versus the United States. And that decision, in effect, immunized the president against criminal prosecution for actions taken during his presidency. And that decision, that immunity decision, has been interpreted broadly to certainly suggest that the Supreme Court is not going to be receptive to challenges of the president's criminality around issues and decisions that he takes while he's in office. And while that case has not been applied to any of his current actions, there is a fear that the Supreme Court, and the Roberts Court in particular, since he is the Chief Justice, has tipped its hand to how it would go if, in fact, there were challenges of the president's action along these lines. And that is a source of real concern and anxiety.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr., listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. When we come forward, a word of hope from attorney Wade Henderson.
While you're stuck in traffic, we can at least bring you up to speed on the news of the day. You're listening to Jesse Jackson Jr. only on KBLA Talk 1580.
I feel so alone.
I'm embarrassed to talk about it.
How can I help my kid if I can't help myself?
I can't remember when I wasn't stressed.
I don't like it inside.
When you feel overwhelmed by your thoughts and emotions, it's okay to get help. You are not alone. CalHope is here for you with free, safe, and confidential mental health resources for youth, young adults, families, and you. Find support now at calhope.org.
During this time, it's important for everyone to know your rights. The 4th, 5th, and 6th Amendments in the U.S. Constitution protects every one of us, regardless of immigration status. The 4th Amendment requires a judicial warrant to search your home. The 5th protects your right to remain silent. And the 6th gives you the right to an attorney. Just remember,
no warrant, no key, my privacy. You don't have to speak. No lawyer inside. Don't say a thing. Yeah, we all got right.
Hey, we all got rights.
Is reviewing life insurance on your to-do list? Now's the perfect time to add it. A friend recently told me that securing life insurance sooner rather than later can help you lock in lower rates for years to come. So I bumped this up on my list and got it done. I called SelectQuote and couldn't believe how easy and affordable life insurance is. I'm 40 and got a $500,000 policy for $16 a month. My husband's also 40 and his $500,000 policy was only $18 a month. Plus, with SelectQuote's same-day coverage, there was no medical exam required and we were covered by the time we hung up. Knowing I have this checked off my list feels amazing, but the peace of mind knowing my family is protected feels even better.
Call SelectQuote at 1-800-729-7070. That's 1-800-729-7070. Or go to SelectQuote.com to get your free quote today. That's 1-800-729-7070. Details on example rate at SelectQuote.com.
Lena Bloom for the Bail Project. Imagine you're stuck in a jail cell and you can't afford bail and someone offers you a way out. Just plead guilty and you can go home and kiss your kids goodnight. What do? What thousands have. You plead guilty whether you are or not. Cash bail makes poverty a crime. That's why the Bail Project helps those who can't afford it while fighting to end cash bail. Because freedom should be free.
Brought to you by the Ad Council.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. If you need help getting your resume in order, finding job training, or landing a job, we've got 3 great options for you. First, the City of Los Angeles has work source centers across the area offering free job support. The California Workforce Development Board can help you with everything from GED prep to vocational training at no cost to you. On the federal level, the Department of Labor's American Job Centers offer a full range of services for job seekers and businesses alike. Visit careeronestop.org, or for more info, just call California's Help Center or visit cwdb.ca.gov or call 916-657-1440. For the City of Los Angeles programs, go to ewdd.lacity.gov or call 213-744-7300. All these services are free to help you get your next job. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Nationwide is so much more than a great insurance company. They're one of America's largest financial services companies. Like how I'm more than Saquon Barkley, the NFL's reigning leading rusher. I'm also the NFL's leading husher. Shh, hush up back there. Wow, I might have just set the hushing record. Well, almost. For your insurance and financial needs, Nationwide is on your side.
Nationwide Investment Services Corporation, member FINRA, Columbus, Ohio.
Now back to more of Jesse Jackson Jr. on KBLA Talk 1580.
I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. Looking forward to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show. My special guest has been none other than Wade Henderson. Wade is one of the most sought-after advisors in Washington, D.C. in the nation on human and civil rights issues. Wade, I want to make one final point and then allow you the opportunity to share with us your thoughts on hope. And they are these. I spoke with Bob Borisage this week, and I said, Bob, listen, there are 900 rallies taking place across the country, some form of resistance to Donald Trump. Some of them have tens of thousands of participants. Bernie Sanders is drawing record crowds along with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. There is some movement by the people across the country in resistance to what's happening to the Constitution, to the poor, to the left out, to the locked out, and the anxiety that we all feel about these executive orders. By the way, we're on track to do about 1,000 executive orders in the first year, by the way, which is crazy, operating without the Congress. But I said the one thing from my perspective that the hundreds of rallies are missing across the country is voter registration. Kamala Harris lost 3 states by about 115,000 votes cumulatively. 115,000 votes. If each rally registered 1,000 people to vote, that's 900,000 new voters every time we protest. In other words, we do have the power by 2026 to do something about this. We do have the power in 2028 to do something about this if we can turn our pain into power and to recognize the strength that we have in our numbers as a coalition. I'm hoping that's some good advice rather than just gripe sessions and protests of holding up signs and waiting for helicopters to determine crowd sizes, that then every crowd of 10,000 people, there are 500 to 1,000 or more unregistered voters right there at that moment, right then. They will never gather again unless we register them to vote at the rallies themselves. That's an old Jesse Jackson thing that I remember from 1983, 84, and obviously 88, and all of the times that he's registered voters for Democrats and progressives across this country. Wade, your thoughts on the importance of staying focused on what we need to do to maintain some sanity in this process, but the work that remains to be done, and your thoughts generally on hope and how we can support your efforts and the organizations that you do represent.
Jesse, you have profound wisdom, and your observation about the importance of voter registration, voter engagement, should be taken to heart by all organizers of protests against some of the president's action. Ultimately, I hope that becomes a standard operating procedure from some of the protests going forward. So you are not simply crying in the wind. It's important advice. It will be taken to heart, and hopefully it will make a difference as we move forward. I have to say, Jesse, in spite of the difficulty of this period, and the first 100 days of the current administration have indeed been quite difficult, I am nonetheless encouraged by some of what I see across the country. First of all, the grassroots movements which are forming as a pushback against some of the president's actions, particularly his overreach in presidential power and in his effort to dismantle civil and human rights laws, is something to be celebrated. The 50-51 movement, 50 demonstrations in 50 states, one movement, 50501, is something that has to be celebrated because it is a grassroots response to what we are seeing in the country with the president's action. So that is key. I'm also really gratified by the audiences that, as you pointed out, Senator Bernie Sanders and Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have generated around the country. It seems to me is particularly noteworthy because they have gotten really large crowds in states where they would not necessarily have resonated with the kind of turnout we are beginning to see. I'm also pleased to see that Democrats are organizing town hall meetings, not just in their own House districts, but in the districts of some Republicans, giving their constituents an opportunity to respond to some of the presidential action. We should note that where Republican office holders have held town hall meetings, particularly among House of Representative office holders, their town halls have been disruptive, rowdy, critical of the president's actions, and they mirror some of the polling data that I alluded to earlier. So I am thrilled at seeing all those actions. I'm also gratified at what Harvard University has done to say no to the president's audacious attempt to control academic freedom, to remove academic freedom, to decide who can teach at these institutions, who should be admitted, the curricula that they actually promote. All of that, it seems to me, is at stake in the Harvard case, and I'm pleased to see Harvard push back. And we are now beginning to see universities, for example, in the Big Ten, beginning to organize themselves in a loose confederation to support one another's actions when they challenge some of the president's decisions. That, all of which, it seems to me, adds up to a kind of grassroots response to what we are seeing that is very encouraging. Now, I'm somewhat disappointed in the congressional voices. I'm totally disappointed in what used to be a bipartisan approach to civil and human rights. And while that has changed over the past 2 decades, seeing Republicans completely abandon their commitment to due process, to the rule of law, to civil and human rights has been deeply disturbing. And with a few exceptions, a few notable exceptions, Lisa Murkowski, the senator from Alaska, has shown a willingness to be somewhat independent in her voice. And that kind of thing, it seems to me, is noteworthy. But nonetheless, Republicans have abandoned traditional policies in support of bipartisanship around civil and human rights. And I have to say, there's disappointment among some of the Democrats as well, who have not really offered up voices of criticism to the president's overreach in significant ways. So that's been troubling. But having said all of that, at the end of the day, I am somewhat optimistic that voters will make their voices heard again in 2026 and in 2028, that they will respond to some of what we have talked about today, the overreach of the presidency in a variety of areas, that they will challenge some of the decision makers. And it does make a difference, Jesse. This weekend, the administration announced a reversal of its budget proposal to eliminate Head Start, which, of course, is a program for preschool children, primarily benefiting low-income kids who don't have the advantages that some with resources do.
Wait, I've got to end it right
No
there.
worries,
I'm so grateful
no
for your
worries.
time. I'm Jesse Jackson Jr. You've been listening to the Jesse Jackson Jr. Show, and every chance I get to get Wade on the program, he'll be our special guest. I look forward to seeing you soon.
I'm honored. Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Amber Payton with